Hi, everyone, and welcome. We are so glad you're here for today's webinar, Communicating Through Disruption, What Employees Want to Hear and How Leaders Can Respond. I'm Maria, and I will be your host for today's discussion. Today, we're diving into a big challenge facing HR, internal comms, and people leaders, which is how to communicate effectively during time of disruption, whether that's organizational changes or broader economic uncertainty. We have our presenters today that will kick things off by setting the stage with the current context many organizations are navigating. Then they will share real-time insights from a recent Remesh study to understand how employees are reacting, what they want to hear, and how those expectations vary by role and generation. From there, we'll explore the implications for communication strategies. And finally, we'll leave time at the end for Q&A. So I want to encourage you to use the entire time to submit your questions, reactions, thoughts, and our presenters will answer those throughout and leave time at the end to dive deeper. And a final quick note is that today's session is being recorded, so we'll be sending out a recording to you in the next few hours after the event. With that, let's jump in, and I'd like to turn it over to Cassandra to introduce herself and for the rest of our panelists to introduce themselves. Cassandra.
Thanks, Maria. I'm so glad to be here today. Hi, I'm Cassandra Roth. I'm a senior consultant at Siegel-Benz, where I help organizations communicate complex topics in clear, human-centered ways, because it's really important to make a connection with folks. And I'm joined by Catherine, my colleague.
Thank you, Cassandra. I'm thrilled to be here today. So, Catherine Hamrick, I am a VP Senior Consultant here at Siegel-Benz. I do what Cassandra does. I'm thrilled to be here today to talk to you a little bit about communicating with your employees and the research results that we found. And I'll hand it to Patrick.
Terrific. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Cassandra. It's really nice to be here with both of you talking through this research that we dreamed up in late February. As we got together, we were really wondering what was the state of the employee experience and mindset here in the US, especially in context of all the changes that have happened just in the past couple of weeks and months. And so what we'll do today is talk through that study that we designed and the really fascinating findings from just over 250 US-based employees. Before we jump into that study, just a bit about myself. So it's nice to be with you all. I am a strategic advisor at Remesh and an organizational psychologist, and it's really wonderful to be here with all of you today. I think talking about some really interesting and surprising data as we looked at the results. I think there were a number of insights that surprised us. But before we jump into those results, just to put things in context, back in January at Remesh, we conducted a field study. And in that field study, and it was conducted mid-January, actually right before the change in administrations, we asked employees this question over on the left. We said, there are a number of workplace trends that different experts and consultants and business leaders are talking about. We would like you, panel, in January to rank order these. And what we found through that exercise is that the most important trend from an employee perspective was to focus on promoting employee well-being in 2025. And we drilled into that with a follow-up question that you see over on the right. And we said, if you were in charge of your organization, what is the single most important thing you would focus on? And through that open-ended inquiry, what we found is that employee well-being again emerged as the most important topic. So when we started 2025, what we heard back from employees is, let's make sure we get employee well-being right. Now, what's so interesting is quite a bit has changed over the last couple of months. It's surprising to look back to mid-January and to talk about things feeling, for many of us, so different. But what we have seen over the past couple of months is that inflation, and it's really some positives and some challenges. The good news is that inflation is down here in the US. But what we're also seeing in recent data is that consumer confidence has come down. The Conference Board in their February report saw a 7-point decline in consumer confidence. And some of that is connected to the stock market, which has been up and down over the past couple of months. If you look just over a 1-month window, what we're seeing is the Dow Jones index is down 2.4%, the S&P is down 3%, and the NASDAQ is down almost 8%. And what we're also seeing here in the US is that layoffs are on the rise at an unprecedented rate. So there have been a number of headlines that have been swirling around that really talk about business, societal change, cultural issues, and economic challenges. And I think this quote from Peter Drucker really frames what we are going to be looking at today. What Drucker says back in the 20th century, which in some ways seems so stable and less complex, is that in times of turbulence, it really can be a dangerous time. But one of the biggest dangers is when we as leaders, managers, consultants, and employees are tempted to deny reality. So with this in mind, what we wanted to explore when Cassandra and Catherine and I got together at the end of February is really what is current state reality from an employee perspective. What we wanted to understand is to what extent are we seeing spillover from all of these external current events into the employee experience. Often when we study the employee experience, we're focused on events that are happening within the organization or around the organization as it relates to its business strategy, its ability to market or sell or win new business. But what we wanted to do is look more broadly and look at how issues in the external environment writ large, social, political, technological, environment, economic, are they creating a sense of hope or anxiety? Within organizations, do employees feel supported and informed, or do they feel unsupported and that there are gaps in the information that they're receiving? And then if that's the case, what can organizations do right now to help their workforce manage what is a very dynamic 2025? So that's what we'll be talking about. If you have questions along the way, by all means, feel free to chat those in. We will make time at the end for Q&A, and we'll have a couple of pauses along the way. Before I jump into the data, any other context, Cassandra or Catherine, you'd like to add just to frame up the study that we all designed together?
Yeah, I think you covered a lot of great ground here, Patrick. One thing we know from a communications perspective and just a people perspective is that there's kind of an emotional letdown or exhaustion period after a period of high or intense stress. And collectively, even though we're seeing things start to improve on the inflationary front and other current events, we are experiencing kind of that macro stress. And some of the things that we feel are really important through that period is to help support your people using empathy and using those honest communications so that you're acknowledging where people really are in the moment.
Great. I don't really have anything to add. I think this is something that probably everyone on the call recognizes that it's an unusual time that we're living in. And I think it was interesting for us to develop this survey so we could see how we could take our own individual feelings about that and see how it is impacting employees across the country.
Yeah. Thank you both. I mean, this idea of macro stress, to what extent is that affecting the workforce, was definitely one of the questions that fueled this. And I think that's the other point, Catherine, that is so powerful about any feedback process is, it gives us this opportunity to take our own personal internal perceptions and hypotheses and guesses and see to what extent are those alive in a broader context.
Exactly. And I think that one of the things that's so great about this, which Patrick's about to share with you, is the spread of the demographics that we were able to talk to the folks we talked to, and the differences that we did see and how people were responding.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so with that context set, let's jump into the study that we just conducted and really focus in on when we talk to US-based employees, what are their perceptions of current events? So let me put this study in context, and I'll start with the study background to Catherine's point. If you have attended any of our webinars in recent months, you'll know much of this context. But what we really wanted to do was to see the extent to which these external current events are spilling over into the employee experience. That was our research agenda and broad objective in question. What we did was we used Remesh Recruit plus Flex to gather together a sample of 254 US-based employees working in various organizations. So they essentially come from 254 different organizations that cut across industry, all US-based. We used a mixed method approach. We were able to ask both open and closed-ended questions, and we'll show you what that data looks like. And if you have not participated in a Remesh conversation before, one of the unique things about the conversation style is that when you respond to an open-ended question, after you've done that, you then get to see responses from other participants. And you then are asked to indicate the extent to which you agree or endorse other comments or disagree with them. And that really starts to provide us with a powerful understanding of which open-ended comments resonate the most. And I think that will be interesting as we look through. We think that these results are directional, right? It's only 254 employees, so it's not a huge sample. But I think the idea here is that hopefully this starts to generate some insights and questions that you may want to explore with your own workforce. I would consider all of these working hypotheses about what is happening across organizations. It is a small sample. In terms of the sample itself, all the participants were US-based. It was an even split pretty much between men and women. The population from a racial demographic perspective was to some extent aligned with the US population. You will see that 81% said they were white. That's slightly elevated from the latest US Census Bureau. You were actually able to, on this question, to indicate that you were more than one race. And so the US Census Bureau says that about 73% of the population indicates as white plus other. So the sample skews a little bit more, but to some extent representative. We had a mix of levels, 41% non-management, the rest 59% in various leadership roles, all the way up to the C-suite. Participants came from a wide range of industries. Here are some of the industries where we gathered the most sample: hospitals and healthcare, technology, education, manufacturing, financial services. We do also have data from government, but it's smaller. But it really came from a broad number of industries. And we also wanted to understand household income and how that may be affecting results. So we did ask about household income, and you can see the distribution down at the bottom. So with this study sample in mind, let's dive into the data. Now, before we do, I think it's really important that you understand the frame or the context that we gave these 254 participants. So at the start of the survey, we didn't want to create too strong of a context, but here was the first message that participants saw after they completed their demographic questions in the intro. We said this study explores how recent current events are impacting your experience at work. In recent months, several notable political, economic, cultural, environmental, and technological events, changes, and disruptions have occurred. So with that as the opening text, the first question we had for these participants was, and maybe hard to see in small text, but how have recent events affected your overall sense of well-being? And we gave respondents these 5 options that you see listed below. And I think we can start at the bottom of the page and work our way up. What we found is that 8% down at the bottom said that recent current events have not affected my overall sense of well-being. Beyond that, though, what we see as the most popular response is 34% are saying, I feel a much stronger sense of anxiety and unease, followed by 28% that said, I feel somewhat more anxious and uneasy now. And then up at the top, we see that combined 31% of respondents feel a stronger sense of optimism and well-being. Over on the right, we started to take a look at these results by different functional levels within the organization. You can see up top, we just took the top 2 response options about feeling a stronger sense of optimism and well-being, 31% for the overall sample, 62% saying they feel a stronger sense of anxiety and unease. Using that as our benchmark, as you work your way down, what really starts to stand out in this data is that our frontline managers, in comparison to the overall research sample, are likely to feel somewhat more anxious and uneasy now. And that contrasts with middle management, which is tending to feel somewhat more optimistic and a sense of well-being in current context. So, but I think the big headline that we're seeing is that at least with this US population, 6 out of 10 are feeling a stronger sense of anxiety and unease based on that prompt that you saw on the previous page. We wanted to follow that up, and we wanted to understand, well, if you are feeling more optimistic or a higher sense of anxiety and unease, what's happening within your organization? Are you getting the support you need from your organization? And so again, what we found here when we asked the question of how effectively is your organization currently supporting your well-being was, I think, some very interesting results. To summarize it, what we find is that about half the population, 51%, feels that their organization is very effectively or somewhat effectively supporting me and my well-being currently. And we're seeing the rest, 49% of the population, responding either that their organization is not effective, it's somewhat ineffective, very ineffective, or I just don't know, not applicable. So I think the way to summarize this is what we're seeing is that there is this increasing sense of anxiety and unease on the previous slide. And about half of us, or half of our work populations, feel that they're getting the support from their organization current state. And the other half is feeling that they need more support. What you may wonder is, well, if you as an employee are feeling more supported by your organization, does that abate your sense of anxiety? Does it make you feel more optimistic? And so to explore that, we took a look at the data over on the right. Correlation is not an explanation of causality, but what we do find is this association. When we take employees and put them into two basic buckets represented by those two columns, those that feel that they are effectively supported by their organization now versus those who don't or cannot agree to those top two box responses. When we split employees into those two populations and then go back and look at the data from that previous question on the previous slide, what we do see, in fact, is a relationship. When employees feel that they are supported by their organization, they are more likely to say that they feel a much stronger sense of optimism and well-being right now, or a somewhat stronger sense of optimism and well-being right now. Conversely, when they're not getting the support that they need within their organization, they are more likely to say, I feel a much stronger sense of anxiety and unease now. So there seems to be this relationship between the two. If we're feeling supported at work, we're able to manage the current context better. And if we're not feeling supported at work, current context is that much more anxiety provoking. Last slide before we take a bit of a pause. We wanted to see to what extent is this dynamic, is this storyline about feeling both a sense of optimism or anxiety, current state, current events, and support from your organization, to what extent is that playing out across industries? And so what we're showing you here are results on those two questions across some of the more populated industries, the industries with more research sample. And what we find is that by and large, across most industries, employees are feeling this sense of anxiety and lack of support or under support. So this storyline, by and large, exists. If you look over at hospitals, only 22% of respondents said that they feel a stronger sense of optimism and well-being now, and only 46% said that they feel effectively supported by their organization. Education, you see a similar result. Technology, we do see more than 50% of respondents in the technology industry feeling supported by their industry, but still pretty low percentage. Government, where you may have quite a bit of curiosity, it is based on a relatively low sample. About 13 respondents come from government. But within that sample, that small sample, 33% are saying they feel a stronger sense of optimism. 61%, this may surprise many of us, are feeling effectively supported by their organization. Comes back down for manufacturing. The one industry that does seem to stand out is financial services. What we're seeing here is a higher level of optimism and well-being now, 47%, and really robust support from organizations. 79% of employees working in the financial services industry feel effectively supported by their organization now. So I think by and large, we're seeing this story in current context. Majority of employees in most industries are feeling a sense of unease and anxiety now, and a majority of employees in most industries are feeling under-supported within their organizations now. So with that in mind, let me just pause here and bring Cassandra and Catherine in to the conversation and get your reactions to the opening of our field study data.
I think for those who are not familiar with conducting this type of research, it's really important that the way that you framed the questions, Patrick, were not aligned with any type of political background. They are very neutral in asking the question. And so the results are really, really fascinating. I think seeing such a difference in the financial services makes me wonder if maybe there's, a temptation there to deny reality, or if they have a better view of what's going on. But seeing, how many people really want their organizations to support them and acknowledge what's going on. And, Catherine and I were talking about this earlier, but organizations really have a lot of tools to effectively support their people. So making sure that they're aware of them is really critical during this time. And Catherine, do you want to talk a little bit about, what employers might be able to continue to promote that they already have in place?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of benefits and resources that employees have access to, and they don't know they have access to them. So I guess not a surprise was that tech was pretty high and feeling supported. We have a lot of tech clients that we do year-round communication for, to focus on well-being and to focus on what is available. So things like employee assistance programs, which tend to get buried in what people know about, but they can provide a lot of help in having somebody to talk to. At no cost to employees very frequently. And employees just aren't aware of them. And we know that from some research that we've done. So things like that, opportunities for, if there's like business resource groups or employee resource groups, whatever it's called at your organization, the opportunity to have conversations in smaller groups about how things are impacting them, I think is also a really positive thing. I do think too that it's super interesting to look at this, that while there is the 6 and 10 that are feeling all sorts of concerns about things, that it does vary, as I think we can sort of see here, by industry that someone's working in. I was not at all surprised to see education really low, because there are clear reasons why education is having issues. So that's the other thing that I would call out. But I would say things like promoting the mental health resources that you have, which in employee assistance programs, but other things as well. And then offering opportunities for people to self-select into things like a BRG or ERG to have a conversation, I think is really important.
Catherine, that conversation piece is really critical. And we know that just doesn't happen as organically as you'd like to see it happen. It really happens because of a lot of support and infrastructure for those groups that are going to start those conversations. So making sure that your managers and leadership feel supported and know where to point people to. They are connected with any of your resource groups and can say, hey, I think you might find this really helpful. Did you know that these groups exist? In addition to just promoting general awareness of all of the support that your organization might offer. Those things, need to be organized and thought through. And they're always important, but during times like this, they become even more important.
We saw a huge rush during the time of COVID, which we now get to look back and it feels like a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. We made a real switch at Siegel Benz to helping our clients develop manager talking points to help them understand the benefits and resources that are available, because it's very likely that it's the manager who's going to be getting those questions about what's available. But we don't often, many organizations, I might even go so far as to say most, though I don't have research to show this, aren't necessarily, when you move into a managerial role, saying, hey, here's all the information you need to help support the well-being of your employees, even though we know it's really important. So just taking that step of making sure that managers know how to talk about these things, it can be really tremendously helpful.
And when people are in that anxiety state, they don't have capacity to kind of go out there and learn it themselves. They need that extra level of care and that, just fine-tuned messaging to make sure that they're reaching the information they need, because otherwise it's just going to compound. They're going to continue to be anxious. They're going to continue to not get the support that they need, even though it's available.
Exactly.
Fascinating. I mean, if we start to piece all this together, right? We all felt a certain sense of disruption, right? It's either, I think, macro stress or macro opportunity. And I think those are the different headlines that have been swirling around in the US the last couple of months. And as we go out and we listen to workforces, we start to see that there are people that are macro stressed or macro excited. But to pick up on the point you both are making, for those populations that really are feeling disrupted and unseated right now, there are so many opportunities for organizations by simply communicating what they current state have to offer and make that available to people that can't really see beyond their stress. That becomes one of the biggest opportunities, but it really takes intentional effort and interventions, even, Catherine, with things like manager talking points that seem to work so well during the last big crisis.
It's making it a priority, and this research suggests that it should be a priority. I actually now didn't think about this before, but I think the slide before this, or two slides before, it's the frontline managers were showing a lot of anxiety. And so you might be killing two birds with one stone to get some talking points into the hands of those frontline managers. Some of their anxiety might be coping with the anxiety of, that they're feeling about not knowing how to help the people that do need some help.
That's a really good point, Catherine, because in those manager talking points, we also usually address the fact that managers are people too, right? These are not just for the people you're managing. This is for you as well. And, that kind of concept of making sure that you're taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others is something that needs to be reemphasized during these periods, and during any time of disruption. The other thing, Patrick, you touched on with this, the divisiveness of how people feel. There is a lot of that, and that's very real, and it can be really scary for employers and organizations to touch that. They kind of want to take a hands-off approach and say, oh, well, you know what, we don't want to get involved, we don't want to say anything about what's going on. But in reality, regardless of what aisle you sit in, you are being impacted by some level of disruption, right? Like, everyone's going to the grocery store and seeing the price of eggs. That's not something that is going to change based on how you feel about things. So focusing on the actual impact, what's happening, what resources there are to help people adapt to those impacts is really, really meaningful. Because even if you're feeling great, you might, not be feeling so good when you go to the grocery store, so there are real issues, real concerns that people are aligned with that you can focus on and focus on the support that they have.
Yeah. So, I mean, coming all the way back to Drucker's quote, and then we'll keep working our way through, he talks about the fact that we need to, during disruption, acknowledge collectively that a new reality is being established. And so what I'm hearing you say, Cassandra, is let's all recognize that. Our political persuasions may influence whether we think this disruption is a macro stressor or a macro opportunity, but we all probably need to recognize within our organizations that we all are feeling disrupted, at least in terms of US employees. And then how do we work with that through communication being so critical? And Catherine, to your point, and I'm showing it here, you're right, your recollection is right. It's those frontline managers who play such a critical role connecting the top of the organization and the bottom of the organization who seem particularly disrupted right now.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, so with that in mind, so thank you both. With that in mind, let's then take a closer look at this sense of support, right? We talked about the fact that half of the population in this study feels supported by their organization, and the other half, or 49%, doesn't. We wanted to drill into that, and so we were able, through the Remesh platform and the mixed method process, to ask those employees who said that they do feel supported, what is your organization doing that makes you feel supported right now? So this is just for the 50% that said, yes, I feel supported right now. And we took their open-ended comments and we used Remesh's autocode feature, which uses large language models to summarize and synthesize all those comments really quickly. And we can see over on the left the themes that emerged. And I think as you look at those themes that are rank ordered from the highest number of comments down to the least, and this is coming from half the population, I think what stood out to me as I looked at it is there seems to be, for those employees who are current state feeling supported, a sense of flexibility as it relates to work-life balance and flexible work arrangements. There also, to I think Cassandra's point that you keep emphasizing, there is a sense of empathy and support as it relates to emotional and mental health support, a work environment that is really taking care of and making me feel positive current state. There's also, though, a real sense of clarity and stability about how we as an organization are going to deal with current state disruptions. And to the extent that we can as an organization, a focus on consistent salary, financial stability, ensuring job security. All organizations can't do that, but this is what we're hearing from those employees who are feeling supported. Over on the right, here are comments back from supported employees, and what we've surfaced is those that are most endorsed. The first one, look, we don't mean to drift into politics, but you can't not drift into politics. I think if you talk to US employees, current state, about what's going on. The most endorsed comment that we heard back was a continuing commitment to DEI in my organization, which lets me know that my company is on the correct side. Look, we're all going to have different opinions about this, but if you do look at various studies and samples, there is a mix of opinions from employees about DEI efforts in their own organizations. Some are diametrically opposed to them, others support them. And what we're seeing here from one employee is a real appreciation for their organization's commitment to DEI. Beyond that, we're seeing really focus on connection, commitment, work-life balance, flexible schedules, the things that you would expect to get right if we're making our workforce feel supported. We then wanted to ask those employees, the 49% that doesn't feel supported, what's going on with them? We did the same process. Here are the themes that emerged from the large language model within Remesh over on the left. And I think what you see here is that under-supported employees want more transparency right now. They want more resources and a sense of assurance. And this really comes out in some of the most endorsed comments that we're showing you over on the right. One of the respondents saying, I work for an agency being directly targeted by political entities. If my organization were able to regain a sense of control about what's being done, I would feel much more secure. Providing context around the impacts of federal mandates and tariffs, giving more money or better benefits to employees, or to the point, Cassandra and Catherine, that you're making, it may simply be making sure employees recognize current state benefits that are provided and the employees are not taking advantage of, and increasing salary and health insurance. But we're starting to see here this sense of what distinguishes support from unsupport in current contexts. Now, this theme around transparency that emerged from unsupported employees we found to be really interesting. And fortunately, we had questions that focused on the extent to which employees feel that they're receiving the information, the communication that they need. We anticipated this being a core need because we know amidst times of disruption how critical it is. So we asked with a closed-ended question, how effectively has your organization been communicating with you in recent months? And what we see is that 2/3 of employees feel that their organization is communicating effectively. I think that that is a good story. But what we see over on the right is that there again is this variance when we break that data down by job levels to the point that Catherine raised before. Those frontline managers are the ones most likely to say, communication right now, the information I need, I am not getting it. And middle management and C-suite and senior leaders who are right in the mix and probably creating quite a bit of the information are the ones who feel most informed and that their organizations are most effective when it comes to communication. Because Cassandra and Catherine have such expertise in the area of communication, we really wanted to take advantage of that when we talked to this research sample and really get a sense of what are organizations doing right now to communicate their support from well-being. And what we heard back to this open-ended question was that employees really value communication that is regular, open, and ongoing. We see that over on the left. If you look at those highlighted pieces of the most endorsed comments, one employee saying, look, my organization is emailing me regularly. They ask how I'm doing. They are reiterating their support for all of us. They're providing open communication from managers, as Catherine was highlighting how important that can be. There's an open door policy. And again, down at the bottom, there is this regular cadence of support. I'm not a communications expert, but I would assume that during crisis, the more we can be disciplined and on point and cadenced about communication, the better. And I'm going to give you both an opportunity to, right now, both reflect on those last couple of slides and make any points about how you really get communication amidst disruption and crisis right.
Well, Patrick, what you just described is creating stability for people, right? By building that trust and having an experience where your people know they're going to get information. This is how they're going to get information. They don't need to worry about what's happening because their company is going to keep them informed. That can have a really reassuring effect on your people. Catherine, I know, we look at this and we see, just how much people appreciate their communications, and we see those frontline managers really feeling that pinch again. What do you think we see most often in terms of the manager talking points and those outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, we see, so I just wanted to start by saying, Patrick, you may not be a communications expert, but we are, it is one of our strong points of view that ongoing regular communication, before I even answer Cassandra's question, is 100% the way to go. And we so often encounter really big companies that are like, well, yeah, of course, we tell people about their benefits once a year when it's time to enroll. And the biggest change we can make and help them make is to really step back and let's talk about how we can have a year-round strategy of making sure people are getting that consistent communication from us, so it doesn't feel like a one-off, or it doesn't feel like, oh, this is just today's hot topic, but that we care about your well-being, back to the research that was done in January, year-round. And we know that it's going to impact different people different ways, which again, we've seen here. Not everybody at your company is responding the exact same way, so that targeting is important, and to be careful, give people opportunities to have conversation. Maybe. So back to that, I mean, we see huge results that, Cassandra, as you're asking, you know, if a company is saying, hey, we really want to have a culture of well-being, one of the most important things we can do is to get that information to the right people. Again, it really depends on the type of company and how does your organization set up. That's the other thing. Like, we are really all about, while it's really helpful for us to all look at this today broadly, what's the US look like? It's going to be different in different organizations because of how people work, because of, frankly, what side of the aisle they're on, possibly because of, you know, are they sitting at a desk or are they not sitting at a desk? So things like getting talking points into the hands of managers is going to be particularly important if you have a lot of remote folks, or you have people that aren't sitting at a desk and getting email. But what we have to do to have this sense of well-being is for employees to know that there's a place to go, whether that's a website or their manager, to get good information that is valid and is easy to understand and that they can take advantage of to really help their well-being. The other thing that came to mind a minute ago when Cassandra was talking about, you know, no matter how we feel about things when we go to the grocery store, eggs are expensive. I talked about EAP in the context of mental health, stress, anxiety, that sort of thing. Almost every employee assistance program also has help around financial stress and financial well-being types of things. And for some reason, most companies are not communicating about that to their folks. So again, that's another resource benefit that most people probably have and probably don't know they have.
Yeah, I think, Catherine, the biggest thing about the EAPs are that any problem you're having, they can help you find the right resource, really. And when we talk, you know, about work-life balance, culture of well-being, part of what we've kind of danced around with the manager talking points is really that idea that to create that culture and to have that balance and to create that supportive environment, it needs to come from the top. If I'm sitting there and I'm, you know, a new employee or a junior employee and I am feeling really burnt out, but I see that my manager is taking phone calls, you know, on their vacation, maybe never taking a day off, and, you know, the person above them and so on and so forth. It creates an expectation that I too cannot take care of my health. I need to behave and model that same behavior so that I can ascend, right? So that cycle, breaking that cycle and those bad habits within an organization needs to come from leadership. I think we've seen a lot of success when we incorporate leaders into the communication and have them share how they're using their workplace flexibility, you know, whether that's openly blocking a calendar for taking a walk or, you know, school pickup or whatever it is, a doctor's appointment. Modeling that good behavior can go beyond just the talking points. In terms of like the values too that we see are so important to people want to feel supported. And it's sad to see it becoming like a political issue, because when people feel supported, they can do their best work. And when you're at work, it should be all about you being able to give the most and the best that you can during the time that you're there. So creating that culture and really making sure that foundationally you're supporting people so that they don't have to worry about what else is going on. They can just focus on the task at hand. That's the power of connecting your communications and your benefits and really ensuring that you have a good culture for your people.
Wonderful. And it's got to start at the top.
Yeah.
Yep. Wonderful. Let me bring us home. We're a little bit over, but we'll wrap this up. Hopefully, if for those of you who are with us, probably about 5 more minutes, and happy to take some questions. But really powerful, I think, context and ideas. So thank you both. So just to wrap this up, you know, what we concluded is, what is the single most important message or information to the point that Cassandra and Catherine are raising that you would like to hear from your organization right now? We had Remesh's summarize feature, which uses Gen AI to take a look at all the data and summarize it. we had the platform put together this summary over on the left. And what really stands out, and we'll send this out to everybody so that you can see in detail what we heard. It does seem that many employees want their organizations right now to protect them from perceived threats. And this, I think, is really a call to action, as Cassandra and Catherine are saying, from the top of the organization down, to really make sure that we are communicating this sense of connection and support in context right now. The last slide as I wrap this up is, as organizations do this, at the center of that communication needs to be a focus on clear understanding of what the organization is doing, current state, to navigate all of the changes that are happening. Also, a desire for more compensation and resources amidst the economic volatility, and I think a broad sense of compassion. I know that I wrapped those slides up fast, but I just wanted to make sure that we start to bring this to a close. Thank you for those of you who are still with us. You know, I think as we bring this together, some of the implications that Cassandra and Catherine and I talked about, we've already put on the table. But I think this model can start to pull us together collectively. This is based on the perceived organizational support literature, which essentially says that when organizations treat employees with a sense of fairness, have robust HR practices, working conditions, and work-life balance that are supportive, and leadership, to Cassandra's point, that is supportive, they feel a higher level of perceived organizational support, and that leads to a whole bunch of positive outcomes. Right in the middle, there seem to be at least 4 questions that surface from this data. How is your workforce feeling about recent events? This is directional. It was gathered on March 17th over the course of 2 hours, really fast, from 250 employees. At best, it's directional. You really need to investigate your own organization, how your workforce is feeling. And we'd love to hear how many of you have actually reached out to your workforce to understand how they feel. What are the critical conversations your workforce wants to engage in now? What's the critical information that your workforce needs right now? And Cassandra and Catherine, really, based on their experience, have witnessed a lot of organizations have a lot more support to provide that gets lost in translation. So clarifying that. And then to the final point that Catherine continued to underline throughout the presentation, what segments of your workforce? Is it the frontline leaders? Is it the frontline employees? Is it a specific segment within your organization is most in need of support? These are, I think, at least 4 questions that you can take away from today's data. As we start to wrap this up, I'll open the floor up for Cassandra and Catherine, your final comments. We can take a couple of questions if you'd like to stay on, audience, and if not, we will send out a recording. But I'd love to hear, Cassandra and Catherine, any final thoughts as we bring our conversation to a close.
I could talk about this all day, Patrick. So, thank you so much for helping us with this. And I think the findings are really fascinating and just really important in our mission to really help people thrive and continue a culture of well-being.
Agree. And we'll just stress the importance of talking to your employees, talk to your workforce, and find out where they actually are. One of the most telling, but perhaps not that surprising slides was about the senior leaders, the C-suite. Those folks are feeling good about how things are being communicated, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's making its way down to the bulk of the workers. And this is, again, perception is reality for your folks. And so just the more whenever we have the opportunity to actually reach out and talk to a client's employees, we know we're going to be able to be more effective in helping them reach their goals.
Wonderful. Thank you both. I know we're over, but I just did want to allow the audience, if any of you wanted to stay for maybe just a couple more minutes and ask questions, we want to give you that opportunity. If not, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll pause for a second or two and see if anything comes in. We're going once, going twice. Catherine and Cassandra, thank you so much. Your insights were so valuable in designing the research, analyzing it, and then really contextualizing it. So thank you. Thank you to our audience. And Maria, thank you as well. We look forward to seeing you all in about a month, and we will be sending out a recording and also a brief insights report that presents more of this data in detail. Thank you all.